Hey everyone, we are live on YouTube and we're live on Facebook, I think, or LinkedIn, and we're getting live on Instagram. So this is our talk today. We are all the places, all the platforms, and we're going to be discussing how can we get through this time when the federal government is on pause for all of the federal funding. This is something that's just been announced. We just heard about this today. And I wanted to make sure that people really understood what this truly means. Sometimes I think people don't know enough about the federal government because we just don't learn these things in college or in high school. We never learned how federal grants affect us on daily life. And we didn't necessarily probably understand until things start going away what it means when people take these things away from us. So I'm going to make sure that I can see the comments on Instagram over here by joining my own live from my other account. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about how can we, as people navigate, people who are in this change-making space, how do we navigate when federal funding is not available to us? So that's what we're jumping on TikTok and all the places to talk about. Feel free to hop into the comments. If you have never been on one of my lives before, they tend to be jam-packed with information. So stay tuned and good morning. Thanks for being here. Hey, John, how are you? It's my cousin on the live. Okay, so let's talk about federal grants. What just happened? Well, first of all, I'm going to add this letter to my background so you can see, you won't see me for a second, but this is the notification on, if you're watching on YouTube or LinkedIn, you'll be able to see it. It's a letter from the Executive Office of Management and Budget, and it is basically saying that all grants and all loans at the federal level are on halt. That means that they are not going to be awarding any new grants, and it also means that any of the grants that previously had been awarded are going to be reviewed. So this is the biggest problem with this is all of the money that we get at the local level for all of our programs, it comes from the federal government. And if you don't understand that or how that works, this is exactly what we're talking about today. So stay tuned. I'll do a little bit more explaining. Keep right here on the live. If you have any questions, let me know. But we're going to run through this really quickly. So as the federal government gives out money in big chunks, and as the federal government decides throughout the year what their priorities are to give out this money, there's a lot of things that happen when we are going through the process of the federal budgeting process, that they make decisions about where the money goes. So who is the priority for the money, what cities or communities get the money, how the money is judged, and how you get access to it. It depends on the rules, and you got to play by the rules, right? So if you want federal money, you got to play by their rules. So the rules just changed on all of us. I don't know if you guys realize that or not, but the rules just definitely changed on all of us. And we probably didn't know that this was going to happen because we weren't told that we were going to have all of the existing programs that are already in statute, that already have funding. We weren't told that those were going away. And I'm sure that this was always part of the agenda. We didn't know it was part of the agenda. So now what we're seeing is that there's not going to be programs that we're used to at the local level, things that we're used to like Head Start or any of the Medicaid, Medicare kind of services. Some of the clinic services are all funded through grants. Now, Medicaid and Medicare are not, they're separate, but a lot of the things in our communities come through the states. Those are funded through grants to the states. Those are funded through grants to your county. Those are funded through grants to your cities. So those grants are usually called block grants, and they're usually just big buckets of money that go over to those other government agencies from entities from the federal government, and then they decide how it gets out to us at the local level. So when we are seeing things happen in our communities and we're thinking, oh, it's state money, or oh, that came from the county, no, that usually comes from the federal government. So if the federal government has halted all of its giving, whether that's discretionary or non-discretionary money, whether that's money that's going to the states in those big block grants, or the money that we can apply to as nonprofits or as businesses, the rules, when those rules change, it means that some people are going to be excluded who previously were included in those programs. Now, some of those programs that solely exist to take care of social problems are going to cease to exist. And even if they're legally statute that we should have those programs will no longer exist because they simply will have a zero in their line item for the budget. So the way that you kill programs, the way that you kill work, the way that you kill any type of social services that you don't want philosophically, you just don't give it any money. And that's the bottom line. So, what's happening right now with this halt is that we're looking at every single place where this money is going. And again, I'm going to pull up this letter. When we are trying to think about what the government has done with our money, we have to first do an assessment. So that's the first thing they're saying is like, we're going to stop funding anything and we're just going to do an assessment. We're going to assess what's happening. And then we're going to decide that anything that does not align with the agenda we put forward in all of those executive orders that we smashed out the first couple of days, anything that doesn't align, anything that's a woke agenda, anything that's the Green New Deal, all of that has to be removed from our plans for funding. That means that if anything was already put out on the street, if you had already applied to something and got an award, if you already had been working on a grant program that had anything to do with what's considered a woke agenda, it's gone. It's now gone. So just be real clear that this means so many pieces of services that we thought we had access to as the public will not operate or even exist the way it currently is. Was yesterday, essentially. This is happening today. So yesterday was the time for for us to be blissfully ignorant with what's about to happen. But today at 5 p.m., all of that money is going away. So for impact organizations like the ones that I work with, for groups that are doing this kind of work but are solely funded not by donors but by federal or state funding streams, all of that work has to stop. If you are working in a job that is grant funded and it was federal grant funded, your job stops today at 5 p.m. I don't think people realize that, because when a grant can no longer be guaranteed, the organization is putting itself in jeopardy of continuing the work and not getting reimbursed by the federal government. So if you're continuing to work on a grant that does not have authorization to actually be working, then it's gone away. Your job is not going to be here tomorrow. So I think people really need to consider all of the pieces of this and how it plays out for every single level of our existence. If it's the end of winter and we're expecting potholes to be filled, well, guess what? We probably won't have transportation grants to do our road work, or we won't be able to get some of the money that we need for infrastructure. So grants operate in a very distinct way. They operate in cycles, and when the federal government has done its funding for the year, when it gives out grants, usually there'll be a slew of announcements online, right? All these announcements will come out on grants.gov. Recently, what happened is grants.gov got a remake to something called Simpler Grants.gov, which is very interesting to me because I would have just called Simple Grants.gov, but like whatever. So simplergrants.gov is where the font is bigger, the user interface is a little different, but it's still grants.gov essentially. And what we're going to see is anything that was previously listed on grants.gov before yesterday, right? Because again, it happens today. So today changes will be made without us knowing. But anything that was already listed as open competitions, forecasted competitions, or things that we could have been anticipating to be funded. For example, I was looking at some of the justice programs that were trying to give community money for recidivism, right? For people to not keep going back into the justice system. Some of those programs had grants listed on the website already, right? They were already listed up as active opportunities that you possibly could be applying for, but no more. That's gonna be cut off. Anything that was there that's active is going to be removed and reviewed. And when it comes back, what it comes back as most likely won't look the same way. So how do you restructure programs, or how do you change priorities? How do you do this work? What happens is you take it away and then you change the requirements so that when it comes back, different people can apply for that money. And what's going to happen is we're going to see a whitewashing of all of this money. So money that used to be for communities of color, they used to be working on equity issues, used to be working on advancing the woke agenda, that's all out. And all of the requirements are going to be made more lenient, or more people will be able to apply. So it would be quote unquote fair. But what that really means is we're not prioritizing those guys anymore. And if you try to argue in this grant proposal that that's the reason we should give you the money, we're not going to accept it. And we can do that in several ways. We can change the requirements in the grant. We can also change how it's reviewed. So we will let our reviewers know that they need to review this, not with their woke agenda lens, but with their lens of discernment of all of these executive orders that we have now put in place. So it all comes back to complete control over the finances of our government. And yes, you're thinking, oh, well, maybe this is a good thing because maybe we need to realign with this new agenda, or maybe we need to take all these federal grants and stop wasting all this money and all these things. But that's not really what's going to happen. That's definitely not what's going to happen. So once you have control over all that money, you can decide where to put it, right? You have to reallocate it to a new place. Reallocation means that you're just going to take it from here and you're going to rob Peter to pay Paul, and you're going to put it over here. So if we're going to see investments made in things that we probably not only don't want to invest in, but we're going to see investments made in places that are counterproductive to the outcomes for our country that we actually want to see. And that part is the really big problem, because there are going to be no advancement for people of color. It's going to be incredibly difficult to do things like breaking glass ceilings. And there's going to continue to be this perpetual pushing downward of, you don't get access to wealth if you're on the lower 98% of our country, right? So this is where, with federal grants, there's some little bit of evening of the playing field for people who are at the very, very bottom, because we have services that we call safety net services, services that are offered to people simply because they cannot get access to these basic living conditions or these basic things on their own, right? So it's a merit-based sort of system. We understand that you need help. We are here to provide help for the neediest people who need it, right? Very, very old tenets of social work kind of thing. And that's what the government does all the time for us, all the time, on top of funding all of our programs at the county level. So all of our youth programs, all of our out of school programs, right? All of these things that we need as parents, as citizens, as community members, all of that the government funds in some way, shape, or form. When the requirements change, when the rules change on us, and we don't have the ability to do anything about it, it's a really big problem, right? Because we don't have any, I can tell you 100% we don't have anything we do about this. When these dollars come back and we see what's really happening with these dollars, we will understand that these programs may never come back, right? Because even if they are legally authorized to do specific things, this memo has said that we're only going to adhere to what we legally have to. But any other things that we can change to make it match our agenda and not the old agenda, we're going to make that change. And we're going to go ahead and do away with all of this stuff that you guys are used to having. So goodbye any kind of social services programs that we're used to. Now, um, I personally, as not only a social impact strategist and consultant for nonprofits, I personally, as a citizen, understand that this is going to affect me. So even if you're not someone in the social services sector, you don't work at a nonprofit, you don't have a faith-based nonprofit, it does not matter. You will see the ramifications of this. And it's actually very disturbing. That's probably the best way I can describe it. It's very disturbing. So what some of my nonprofit clients are going to ask, like, what do you advise that we do? If you have a current grant right now from the federal government, or you were working on submitting or writing a federal grant from the government, you need to listen. You need to share this with your nonprofit friends, make sure that everybody is paying attention. You cannot predict that that money is going to be here tomorrow. So if you have not already applied, you need to just stop your effort and wait. And the way that you argue how you need money or why is going to have to change if you submit it. If you already have a grant and you are a federal grant recipient and you have basically just been told to cease and desist from working because there is no money to guarantee your work. So if you continue to do the things that you normally would do to serve the American public, then you will put your own organization at financial jeopardy of having to pay for those services. You may or may not get reimbursed once the federal government has been done with the review of your program. And in the letter, it explains that there is until February 10th for them to review this letter and to review all of this work and then make a determination of if it's actually in alignment with the new federal agenda. So in that sense, there's there you have until February 10th that you're not going to have money. And that's a problem because that's a long time to operate without some money. That's at least 2 weeks. So if we know that we're not going to have any money from the federal government for 2 weeks and that the work in that time frame is possibly not reimbursable, then can you continue to operate? And do you need to have conversations with your staff about what this means, right? What does this mean for them? I'm trying to make sure that I check on the Instagram folks because I haven't been on the live on Instagram and I'm not sure if we're quite there. But I can see you guys here on TikTok. I haven't seen any comments that come through YouTube or LinkedIn, but you're welcome to ask questions, right? Come on into the conversation and help me understand what you're thinking about this topic. And if this is something that's concerning you, right? And it should be. Honestly, we should all be super concerned about this. I think that there's not enough of us who want to see change and are willing to take the actions to make sure that change happens in our community. So if you are not a nonprofit person that I was talking to before and you're still listening to this, what can you do? What can we all be doing right now? We can all be putting our money where our mouth is, right? Every one of us can volunteer. Every one of us can go and join a nonprofit board. Every one of us can go and give money to and give donations to organizations who are doing the work that we know is not going to be funded anymore. So organizations that typically serve undocumented migrant populations, we know that's going to be cut. Organizations that do any kind of social justice or anything that has environmental justice, we know that's going to be cut, right? It's already said so in the memo. So we have to then pick up the slack, quite honestly. And if we don't at the community level put the money into it, we will see these things go away completely in our generation. And trust me, in 4 years, it will be almost impossible to just put them right back. Like that's not how it works. You can't just flip the switch and move the whole system really quickly. And you're actually seeing it move pretty quickly right now. But that's 4 years of planning in the making of trying to destroy what we had, right? So this is a very deliberate attack on the infrastructure of our country through financial terrorism. And I can't imagine how we're going to continue to grow as a country if this is what's going to happen for 4 years. And especially if our major mechanism of doing work is to get money out the door. And the money that's going to be going out the door is now has all these different rules and not regulations necessarily, but strings that people will have to pull that will seem probably not very safe or not very helpful for our communities. So all of this to say, I'm flabbergasted that this is what's happening in terms of our society, in terms of how we treat people who are doing work in the social impact sector, right? To just cut their money off. I can't even imagine what that feels like for organizations who are almost 100% funded by the federal government. And this is why in my coaching and in the work that I do, I try to help people understand that, like, you have to diversify your funding. You cannot have 100% of your money coming from grants. You cannot have more than 60% of your funding coming from any one government source, because the second that that money is cut from a government budget, you are done. It's just not sustainable. So as I go through this, just complete lack of belief on what's happening at the federal level, I will continue to give you updates. I will continue to share my thoughts. I will continue to be a resource for folks who want to learn more about how the government works and what exactly is happening at this time. And if there's any reason you want to, get in the comments, get in the DMs, and let's connect. All right, everyone. I'm Wendy V, coach for social entrepreneurs. I've been here for about, I don't know how we've been, almost about 20 minutes. And I hope that you guys found this live helpful. I'm going to make sure it's posted in all the places, pinned up at the top so that y'all can find it. You can share it with other folks who are do-gooders, other change makers, other people who need to understand how this particular issue is going to affect them in the future. All right. Good to see everybody. And it's about time to end the live. So thank you for joining us. And